Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The city hummed with life. New York, as always, bustled with energy. People rushed along the sidewalks, hailing cabs, sipping coffee, and talking into their phones, blissfully unaware that the skyline was about to change forever. Somewhere deep within the heart of the city, in a heavily secured laboratory that no one knew existed, Bruce Banner worked feverishly. His hands moved over a series of complex instruments, sweat beading on his forehead as he attempted to control the invisible monster inside him. It had been months since his last transformation. The Avengers were scattered across the globe, each dealing with their own crises, and Banner had been left alone to wrestle with the demon within. The Hulk had always been an extension of his rage, a creature born from his anger, fear, and the dark corners of his mind. But Bruce had grown stronger over the years, more in control, or at least that's much what he wanted to believe. Recently, something had shifted. He felt it now more than ever, a fracture, deep within his psyche, like a hairline crack running through his brain, growing longer, wider, more dangerous with each passing moment. He knew something was wrong, and tonight, as the full moon hung heavy over the city, he was running out of time to fix it. Just a little more, just a little longer, Bruce whispered to himself, his voice strained. The experiment in front of him whirred to life. A gamma pulse flickered through the air, making the hair on his arm stand up. He gritted his teeth, fingers flying across the console as he monitored the result. But something in the data was off, wildly fluctuating beyond what he'd anticipated. His eyes widened, panic seeping into his chest. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through his skull. Bruce gasped, clutching his head, stumbling backward as the fracture in his mind broke wide open. His control was gone in an instant. His breath hitched, muscles expanding, skin stretching. The green washed over him, starting at his fingertips and consuming him entirely. No, he roared, voice deepening, warping into something primal. The Hulk surged to the surface, his anger spilling over like a tidal wave, and this time there was no Banner to pull him back. Spider-Man swung through the skyscrapers, enjoying the crisp night air as it whipped past him. Patrol had been uneventful, just the way he liked it. Peter Parker often thought about how quiet nights like these were deceptive. New York City had a way of masking its dangers, like a ticking time bomb hidden beneath the noise of traffic and the flickering neon lights tonight, though all seemed peaceful, until his spider sense tingled. Peter's reflexes kicked in instantly. He flipped in midair, shooting a web at a nearby building and pulling himself higher. He narrowed his eyes behind the mask, scanning the streets below for any sign of danger. And then he saw it. A massive shadow moved between two towering buildings in the distance, and with it the telltale sound of destruction, concrete crumbling, metal groaning under strain, the panicked screams of people running for their lives. Peter's heart sank. He need to see the green skin to know who was responsible. The Hulk. Crap, Peter muttered to himself. This can too be good. In a matter of seconds, he was swinging in the Hulk's direction, the sounds of chaos growing louder. Peter knew Bruce Banner had fought alongside him on more than one occasion. But this didn't feel like the same Hulk he'd come to know. The Hulk Peter remembered had a modicum of control, a presence of mind that was absent from the wreckage unfolding below him. As Peter neared the scene, his fears were confirmed. The Hulk rampaged through a crowded street, his massive hands tearing chunks of asphalt from the ground and hurling them at random. Cars flipped end over end, smashing into storefronts. Civilians screamed and scattered, some lucky enough to escape, others buried under the debris. Spider-Man's first instinct was to drop in, quip a joke, and hope he could talk the Hulk down. But one look into those glowing green eyes told him it wouldn't work. This Hulk wasn't listening. "Hey, big guy," Spider-Man called out, landing on the edge of a nearby building. "I don't know if you've noticed, but you were kind of leveling half of Manhattan here. Maybe we could take this somewhere less populated." The Hulk turned his head toward the sound of Peter's voice, his eyes narrowing. A low, guttural growl emanated from deep in his chest. There was no recognition there, no flicker of Bruce trying to break free. This was pure, unadulterated rage. Peter's stomach twisted. He shot a web and swung closer, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could get through. "Bruce, come on, man. I know you risk in there. We've been through worse than this, right? Let's silly just..." He didn't get to finish his sentence. The Hulk roared, a thunderous sound that shook the very ground, and lunged at Spider-Man with blinding speed. Peter barely had time to react, flipping backward and shooting another web to pull himself out of harm's way. Okay, so talking's not gonna work, he muttered under his breath. Plan B then. The next few minutes were a blur of movement. Spider-Man dodged and weaved, doing everything in his power to stay one step ahead of the Hulk's devastating blow. Each punch from the Hulk cracked the pavement, sending shockwaves through the street. Peter fired web after web, trying to slow the giant down, but it was like trying to stop a freight train with a piece of string. He had no idea what had happened to Bruce, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a Hulk out of control. This was a Hulk without any trace of Banner's humanity to hold him back. As Peter swung past a toppled building, he caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold, a mother and her young son trapped under the wreckage of a collapsed street lamp. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, his mother frantically trying to shield him from the falling debris. Spider-Man acted on instinct. He shot a web at the lamp, yanking it out of the way just as the Hulk charged past. The ground shook with every step the monster took, and Peter knew they didn't have much time. He swooped down, grabbing the mother and her son, and pulled them to safety just as the Hulk's fist came crashing down where they had been. Peter's breath came fast, adrenaline surging through his veins. This wasn't a battle he could win. Not like this. He needed to get Bruce back, to find some way to reach him. But with each passing second, the Hulk grew more violent, more destructive. Think, Peter, think, he whispered to himself, crouched on a rooftop watching the chaos below. He couldn't just keep dodging forever. Sooner or later, someone else was going to get hurt, or worse. That's when it hit him. If he couldn't stop the Hulk physically, maybe he could stop him mentally. In an abandoned Stark Industries warehouse on the edge of the city, Peter found what he was looking for. The neural inhibitor device. He remembered Tony Stark mentioning it once, something that could be used to calm a rampaging Hulk. Peter had never seen it in action, but right now it was the only thing that could potentially work. As he strapped the device to his wrist, he couldn't help but feel a surge of doubt. Could this really bring Bruce back, or was it too late for that? He didn't have time to second-guess himself. The Hulk's soft path of destruction was headed straight for the heart of New York, and if Peter didn't act soon, there wouldn't be a city left to save. With the device secured, Spider-Man swung back into the fray. The Hulk was already tearing through another street, roaring in frustration as more civilians scrambled to get out of his way. "Hey, Green," Peter shouted, hoping to grab the Hulk's attention. The Hulk turned, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto Spider-Man. For a moment, Peter thought he saw something, just a flicker, a brief spark of recognition in those glowing green eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by the same blind fury. "All right, here goes nothing," Peter muttered. He activated the neural inhibitor, sending a pulse of energy directly toward the Hulk. For a second, the Hulk paused, his massive form twitching as the device took hold. But then, with a roar of defiance, the Hulk shrugged it off, smashing his fists into the ground with enough force to send Peter flying. Okay, that didn't go as planned, Peter groaned, pulling himself to his feet. His body ached, but he wasn't done yet. There had to be another way. Peter stood up, his entire body throbbing from the Hulk's latest blow. His mind raced, struggling to come up with a plan. The neural inhibitor had failed, but that brief flicker of hesitation in the Hulk's eyes gave Peter a glimmer of hope. Somewhere inside that beast, Bruce was still there. He had to be. Spider-Man couldn't waste any more time. The city was hanging by a thread, and with every second the Hulk remained in this state, more lives were in danger. Peter scanned the chaotic streets, trying to figure out his next move. The destruction spread for blocks, windows shattered, cars overturned, and sirens wailed in the distance. This was up to him. He swung down from the rooftop, darting between crumbling buildings and dodging debris. The Hulk had already moved further downtown, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Peter had to stop thinking of him as the Hulk. This was Bruce. He had to believe that if he didn't there'd be no way to reach it. Peter caught up to the rampaging giant near Central Park. The once lush greenery had been reduced to a war zone, trees uprooted, benches smashed, the pathways cracked and torn apart by the Hulk's monstrous footsteps. Spider-Man took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was likely to be the most dangerous fight of his life. The Hulk, standing in the middle of what had been a peaceful clearing, roared with fury. His massive fists pounded the ground, sending shockwaves through the park. Peter knew that if he tried to face him head-on, it would be over in seconds. He had to use his head, like always. Peter swung around the trees, keeping his distance while trying to catch the Hulk's attention. Bruce, I know you were in there, he shouted, hoping his voice could cut through the rage. You forgot to fight it. This isn't you. The Hulk turned toward him, his face twisted in anger, but something flickered in his eyes again. Peter's heart raced. It was barely a spark, but it was there. He pushed on, desperate to keep that tiny thread of humanity from slipping away completely. I've seen you beat this before, Bruce. You can control it. You don't have to let the Hulk win. Peter's voice cracked with the strain, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He wasn't sure if Bruce could hear him, but he had to believe he could. That was the only way forward. The Hulk hesitated, his hulking frame stiffening as Peter's words seemed to sink in. For a brief moment, the monster stopped moving, the ground around him stopped shaking, and the distant sound of destruction faded into an eerie stillness. Peter lowered himself to the ground, cautiously approaching the Hulk. That's it. Big guy, you were still in control. I know you are. Just focus. We can get through this together. But the stillness didn't last, as if sensing the internal struggle within. The Hulk roared once more, louder than before, and lashed out violently. He swung his massive arm in a wide arc, and Peter barely managed to dive out of the way before the blow could connect. Peter hit the ground hard, rolling to his feet in a daze. This wasn't working. He could keep doing this forever. The Hulk was too powerful, and Spider-Man knew he couldn't take another hit like that. Desperate, Peter reached for the neural inhibitor again. He wasn't sure how much more the device could take, but he had no other choice. He activated it, sending another pulse of energy toward the Hulk. This time, the effect was immediate. The Hulk staggered, clutching his head in agony as the pulse disrupted his rage-filled mind. Peter sprinted forward, webbing onto the Hulk's arm and pulling himself up to the monster's shoulder. He clung there, inches from the Hulk's face, and screamed with all the force he could muster. Bruce, come on, you were stronger than this. Don't tell you let it end like that. The Hulk's eyes blinked, flickered, and for a heartbeat, Peter saw something familiar. The rage receded, and Bruce Banner, as haunted gaze met Spider-Man's set, his voice came out in a strained, broken whisper. Peter, help me. Peter's chest tightened. Bruce was in there, fighting for control. But just as quickly as Bruce had appeared, the Hulk's fury surged back, overwhelming the scientist once more. The monster howled, swiping at Spider-Man and sending him flying through the air. Peter tumbled across the ground, landing hard on his side. Pain coursed through his body, but he couldn't stop now. He couldn't give up. Not when Bruce was so close to breaking through. Gritting his teeth, Peter forced himself to his feet, his vision blurring from the strain. The Hulk loomed over him, chest heaving, his face twisted in rage. But beneath it, Peter could still see the shadow of Bruce Banner, trapped desperate. He had to reach him, had to break through the wall of anger and violence that kept the man locked away. Peter's mind raced as he stood before the Hulk, trying to think of something, anything that could tip the balance. And then he remembered the recordings, the old videos of Bruce talking to himself, trying to rationalize his struggle with the Hulk. The ones that had revealed his greatest fear, losing himself completely. Peter tapped into the small communicator on his wrist, hoping the device could transmit the recording into the Hulk's mind. He scrolled through until he found the file, Bruce's own voice, raw and full of pain, talking about his fear of becoming a monster forever. Play, Pierre whispered, and the audio crackled to life. The Hulk froze as Bruce's voice echoed through the air. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to lose control, but sometimes it feels like I already have. The Hulk is me, and I am him. We were the same, but I don't know if I can come back from this. The effect was immediate. The Hulk staggered, his eyes wide with confusion. Peter watched in awe as the monstrous figure seemed to shrink, just a little, as Bruce's voice played over and over. I am afraid, so afraid. What if I lose control and there's nothing left of me? What if the Hulk is all that remains? Peter didn't waste a second. He ran forward, closing the gap between himself and the Hulk, shouting over the recording. You are not gone, Bruce. You are still here. You can beat this. You have to beat this. The Hulk's body trembled, and the green in his eyes dimmed. His massive frame wavered, shrinking slightly as Bruce sighed and fought to regain control. Bruce, listen to me, Peter said, voice hoarse from shouting. You re not just the Hulk. You re Bruce Banner. You re a scientist, a genius, and you re one of the strongest people I know. You can control this. You can. For what felt like an eternity, the Hulk stood frozen, his body trembling, his face a mask of pain. Peter held his breath, waiting, hoping. And then slowly, the Hulk began to shrink, His massive muscles receded, his skin turned pale, and his face softened. In moments, the Hulk was gone, and Bruce Banner stood in his place, trembling and weak, but himself. Peter rushed forward, catching Bruce before he could collapse to the ground. The scientist's body shook with exhaustion, and his eyes were filled with tears. I didn't think I could stop it, Bruce whispered, his voice barely audible. Peter held him steady, his own heart pounding in his chest. You did, Bruce. You did it. Bruce looked up at him, his expression one of raw gratitude and guilt. I could be killed so many people, but you didn't, Peter said firmly. You stopped it before it got that far. You were stronger than you think. The sounds of sirens grew louder in the distance, and Peter knew the authorities would be there soon. But for now, the city was safe. The destruction had ended, and Bruce was back. As the two of them sat amidst the wreckage, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. Bruce had come close to losing himself completely, to becoming nothing more than a mindless monster. But thanks to Peter's determination and Bruce's own strength, they had pulled him back from the edge. Peter let out a long breath, the adrenaline finally leaving his system. He glanced down at Bruce, who was still staring at the ground, lost in his own thought. Hey, Peter said softly, nudging him. You were going to be okay, Bruce. We'll get through this together. Bruce nodded slowly, though the weight of what had happened still hung heavily on his shoulder. I don't know if I can keep doing this, he admitted quietly. What if next time? I don't dare come back. Peter didn't have an easy answer for that, but he did know one thing for sure. We'll figure it out, he said. We always do. And as the sun began to rise over the shattered city, Peter knew that despite everything, they had won. Bruce had fought back the darkness inside him, and no matter what came next, Spider-Man would be there to help him every step of the way.